Thanks a lot for coming. It's really nice to see a lot of people here. What I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about my work and how it developed. I've been making my work for 50 years, so it's a long. This year was 50 years, so it's a long time. But in that time, it's developed a long way from where it started. I wanted to say a little bit first about the importance of Ballinglen Foundation on my work and how it kind of impacted so greatly on it 22 years ago when I first came here, that it informs my work to this day. Everything I do really is informed by stuff that started off here. It came at the perfect time for me, really. The first time I came in 2000, year 2000, and it was the first time since art college I'd had a long period to work on my work without any interruptions. Up until that point I was really doing it in the evenings and weekends and stolen bits of moments. But I came here for 3 months and it gave me two things really. It gave me one time to devote to my work and nothing else. And the biggest thing it gave me was permission to think freely about it. I think as an artist you have lots of thoughts and you put them on paper or whatever to share with people, but it's very difficult to get permission to feel that free, to think that freely, and come here and find other people who are sharing the same experience, other artists to talk to. I mean, Keith's here tonight. I met him the first week I was here. So I'll share some of the thoughts that developed here the first time I came, just to sort of show you how, if you follow what I'm saying, you'll then go back and look at the pictures and you'll find all the things I'm saying in the pictures. The basis of my work, all my work, is looking at the micro but thinking about the macro. So you look at something really small, like behind you there's just 2 mussel shells. And that's all that picture is, but within it makes you think about landscapes, about moons, about all sorts of things that have nothing to do with what the actual pictures are. It's just 2 mussel shells. The first thing was Downpatrick Head, which to me is the best place I've ever been to on the earth to explain the power and beauty of nature. You can't be at Downpatrick Head with those waves coming in all the way across the Atlantic, nothing between you and America, and those waves just keep coming and coming and coming and coming. They've been coming like that for about 3 million years or so, and it's never ever stopped. And that makes me feel very small, makes me feel absolutely tiny. The rocks out there are probably 350 million years old. My 70-year lifespan, in comparison to that, is absolutely nothing. You couldn't even plot it on a graph. You couldn't put my lifetime on the lifetime of those stones out there on the same graph. You go to other places. Eastleigh Beach became a favourite of mine. I don't know if anyone's ever been out there, but when the tide's out at Eastleigh Beach, you've got half a mile of solid black rock with huge fossils in, 12, 15 foot across. John Smalley, another fellow here, and I went out there and we found seed heads from sea lilies, 12 foot across, and you're just walking on them and you can't help but feel the beauty and the power of nature, and that's what Ballycastle gave to me. In those 22 years since I came here, all my work has been photographic. I started off when I came here as a black and white photographer. I didn't do anything that was anything to do with colour. The scale of what I did was quite small because the darkroom process and the printing process made you kind of operate quite small. But in those years I've kind of tried to follow the development of photography itself as a medium. So my work has moved from analogue, darkroom, wet process, negatives, to digital. I turned to digital in 2007. It's gone from monochrome to colour. The other thing it's brought is scale, because I can now print any size I want, or get printed any size I want. About 3 years ago I did a commission on the Isle of Harris in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, and that was a mural, and they wanted one photograph 26 foot by 9 foot, and that was printed at a factory in Glasgow, and it was a huge piece of work. It nearly blew my computer up because of the size of the file. That's another matter. About 3-4 years ago, before lockdown, before the pandemic, I started to become very disillusioned with photography. I don't know if any of you know Grayson Perry, but he gave a lecture, the Reith Lecture, which is an annual lecture in England, where somebody of note gives a lecture about the state of the world. And he called photography a tidal wave of sewage. There's just so much of it around, and it's as a person who's trying to make their living out of photography, it became very difficult, because everybody's got a camera in their phone, which is more powerful by far than the first digital camera I ever bought. And everybody's printing out. All the galleries open in London were all photography galleries. Everybody's a photographer. Everyone wants to try and make photographs. But it became very difficult to stand out, very difficult to become something different. So I started on making the light boxes, which you see upstairs. And the motivation for that came from looking at my own work on an iPad. I kept looking at my own work on an iPad and thinking, this looks more beautiful than the print, because it's backlit, the colours are so intense, they're so sharp. So I set off a kind of a task to myself to try and replicate that beauty, that kind of precision in a frame which was backlit. And so after a lot of blind alleys I went down, including nearly killing myself by electrocuting myself with a 240 volt light, I ended up with 12 volt LEDs, and I now work with a company in Gateshead in England, and they do all the work for John Lewis stores. So all those, you go in a big department store and you see huge backlit advertisement for perfume or for makeup or whatever, and this company makes all those. And I went along with my little portfolio and said, can you do these? And they were really lovely, and they worked with me, and they showed me what they can do, and the results I think are really intense. The green one that's in that little dark room, I hope you all saw that, because that was kind of a favourite really. And then more recently I've tried to move from still images to moving images. I'm still in the process of kind of getting to grips with it. It required me to learn video editing software, which is very complex. But I thought I could see a way of making something that was interesting, and just carried on following the line of my work through looking at something little, thinking about something big, making something beautiful but thought-provoking. In fact, if there's anything I try and do, is to make it beautiful and thought-provoking at the same time. A little bit about the way I work. It's evolved over the last 20 years into a very unusual way of working. I don't know anybody else who works the same way as me. But what I do is I make a glass plate out of stuff I've collected off the beach. So I just walk along the beach. My favourite thing to do is walk along the strand line, which is an Irish term for the line of flotsam and jetsam that the last tide has left on the beach. And that's my favourite thing to do, is to follow that line along the beach and then pick up bits of things that other people would just leave behind, bits of plastic, bits of seaweed, bits of fishing line, bits of net, all sorts of stuff that nobody else would be interested in. I then put them on a glass plate, and when I've collected the stuff, I also find a bottle and collect some seawater, from the same beach. I should say one thing that happened the first time I was here, which was very, very seminal, is that my cousin Christine, who's here from London, her sons came over to visit me, and at the time what I was doing was I would have a normal black and white camera, and I would go out on the beach and I would collect some kelp and collect some things and make a sort of arrangement, and then I would photograph it. But I worked a way out of while I was photographing it, if I wet it at the same time, you could make kelp look like metallic aluminium or something like that. So what I would do is set this shot up, lock the camera down, and then me and the two boys would wander along the beach and find out my bottle, fill it with seawater, and then douse the area, and then quickly take a photograph while it was running around. One day, one of the boys, I don't know if it was John or Jeffrey, I still don't know, came wandering back from the beach holding this thing up, and it was a green plastic 7-Up bottle with a message in it. And the message had come from an island off Newfoundland. It had taken 6 years, I think, to get from Newfoundland to Downpatrick Head. And it was a school project. The most disappointing thing about this story is I wrote twice to the school to say I found a message that you sent me, and I got no reply. I really think that's poor. But the thing that interested me most was the bottle itself, because it was absolutely battered and scratched and scratched and scratched and scratched. And it suddenly struck me out on that beach that every scratch in it was a part of its journey. It was like a diary. So every scratch was made by a barnacle or the sharp edge of a mussel shell or something like that. And then I started to look at this bottle and I thought, maybe I could print from this bottle. So I was still working in black and white photography at that time, so I was cutting sections out of the bottle, putting these sections of plastic bottle in an enlarger and just making straight prints from the scratches. And that was so kind of mind-blowing and altering the way my work went. It just skidded off into a different direction. So this is a dead plate. This is one I've used before, and it has been covered in PVA glue just to keep it intact. So this is just fishing line and dried seawater. You can pass it around if you like. In the past I would have put this in an enlarger and printed from it, but in 2007 I was artist in residence at Lancaster University for a year in the environmental science department, and they persuaded me that I would get better results if I started scanning these plates digital on a flatbed scanner than I would from making prints from them. So I started to play with that, and it was mind-blowing. It changed my work because if you scan at high resolution you can then make huge prints. It brought colour into my work, it brought scale into my work, it brought all sorts of different things, and I started to work with a digital printer, and then the prints got bigger and bigger, and it made a huge difference. So I scan these plates at high resolution. The scanner I use is not really a very expensive scanner. It's an Epson Perfection scanner, but it can scan up to 12,000 dots per inch. So you can actually scan at incredible high resolution, and it makes a sort of huge difference.
Sorry, can I just ask something?
You go.
What's the difference between a scanner and a photocopier?
I think a photocopy just photographs one page, whereas a scanner turns that into a digital file that you can then put into Photoshop and alter. You can't do it from a photocopier. But, so I collect stuff, insignificant material I call it, fishing line, bits of metal, One of my favourite things to find is beer can bottoms or Coke can bottoms. Because on the beach you always find them, because the bottom of the can is concave, it's very rigid, so all the rest of the can gets smashed away by the sea. And it leaves the kind of base of it, the concave base of it. And I was walking on the beach one day, and this is the sort of thing that I do with a cork, and I kind of kept on moving it around like that in the sun, and suddenly you realise that if you hold it in a certain way and light it in a certain way, it looks convex, not concave, and it looks like a planet rather than a bottom of a can. So I use can bottoms a lot. This big picture at the back here is the basis of it is kelp at the bottom, and then there's a huge piece of fertiliser sack which I found on the beach. So that's the scratched and broken bit. The next sort of development in my work was into moving images, and what happened was that plate, where is it? Could you just hold it up? That would take me about a month to make, so that each time I would add a bit of fishing line and a bit of seawater. I would try and create a circle and it's a battle between what the seawater wants to do and what I want it to do. To get seawater to dry in a perfect circle is very hard. And so it's this sort of daily battle. I don't work on one at a time. I've got maybe 7 or 8 going at a time. But I keep going back to them and think, this one's ready now. When I used to think it was completely ready, I would then scan it and it would become a photograph. But one day I was thinking about it, I thought, well, if I scanned it at each stage, I could perhaps make some kind of continuous image that was the beginning of the plate and the middles of the plate and the end of the plate. So I taught myself video editing software, and I did some scans. And this film you're going to see was my first finished movie. It took 3 months to make. It was 115 scans taken over 3 months. That was then boiled down to 48 frames, and then that was edited into a kind of animated movie. When it was finished, it obviously needed some sound, so I didn't really know what to do. And initially I was going to just steal some music from somewhere off the internet and put it to it. But my son, who's a musician, shamed me into saying, well, you wouldn't like it if somebody just stole your photograph. So I actually commissioned a contemporary composer to write me some music for the film, a guy called Richard J. Birkin, and he did a tremendous job. He just really did listen to what I said, he watched the film a lot, and then he created some music to go with it. So this film is called Bun the Sphere, which the late, great Brian Polk told me was the Irish language term for horizon. The first time I came here, on my studio wall, I put a list of words to do with my work, like ocean, beach, pebbles, fishing lines, seaweed, and people would just come in and write the Irish language to it. And when it got down to horizon, Brian Polk just wrote Bun the Sphere on it, and I thought, wow. I said, what does that mean? He said, it means the bottom of the sky. And that just, I thought, was the most poetic thing I'd ever heard. So it was a great thing. It's made out of one piece of wire that I found at Downpatrick Head. I think it's a piece of fencing wire from a farmer's fence. And as I say, it took 3 months, 115 scans, and music by Richard J. Birkin. So you put the lights off and run the film. It's 15 minutes, so don't try and watch it as a film, just treat it as an experience. But it's just something this big, and yet it makes you think about huge
Yeah.
issues. You know, that's the sort of basis of my work. Really.
And then do you use seaweed in it? I thought so.
Not yet, but it's
There's no seaweed in it?
no, just all seaweed.
There's water?
Yeah. There is a second, John.
Do your pieces age with time?
I haven't done this long enough to really know. But the pictures now, they seem to be as fresh now as when I did them. And people seem to like them no matter how old they are. So, there is a second film which actually I've just really finished, and tonight is really a world premiere of it. It's never been shown in public before. It's only 12 minutes, not 15. So you don't have to sit for that long. The difference in this one is it was more. I like to find copper wire on the beach. If I find a piece of copper wire, I'm really happy because I can get greens out of that. With the verdi green that comes out of the copper. So this one's made with copper wire and fishing line, which is one of the favourites. But for the music for this one, I did something very different. Instead of commissioning somebody to write the music, I approached a musician who has been a favourite musician for about 20 years. A guy called TJ Remy, who is based in Birmingham in England. He's an Asian fusion kind of musician. And I wanted a sort of Asian feel to the music for some reason. And I'm 70 years old, so I've got no care anymore about whether people are offended by what I say to them. So I decided just to approach him. So I found him on the internet. I said, listen, I've listened to your music for 20 years and I've loved it. I've been making these movies, and I sent him a link to the first film. And within 40 minutes he was back to me saying, I'm in. And he wrote, produced, played all the instruments and recorded the soundtrack for the second film. It is a little bit different in the fact that I had no control. With the first thing, because I was paying for the music, I had a little bit of control. But this one he did for free. I didn't really think I could start telling him what to do. And also he was a bit slack on time, so it did take him about 4 months. And I kept on thinking, I'm going to ring him up and say, come on, hurry up. And I thought, I can't really, because I'm not paying for it. But when he finally produced the music, and he sent me the finished result, I put it together with the film, and it was just magical. It was a magical moment for me. So. You want to watch the second one?
Yes.
We put in 2.5 minutes of just blank screen between each film, so that people just didn't need to go from one to the other straight away. So, yeah, but I think the first one, you need a bit of time to think about it. When I finished the first film, I sent it to 10 people as a sort of market testing. And one of them was a guy called Robert McFarlane, who is a writer, professor of English at Cambridge, and he's considered to be the foremost writer on the English landscape. And he wrote me a lovely email saying how he'd enjoyed it and how. And then 2 of the people at the tent said he made them cry, and it was very sort of powerful. And I thought from then I'm really onto something. I'm really, I'm kind of everything I set out to do, I think I've achieved, which is unusual in life, isn't it?
Yes.
I'll say no more. You've had your money.